It's something worse than C-19. It's taken thousands of lives and it's caused more accidental deaths than we even know. Opioids. And it all started with getting it into the hands of doctors, the people we trusted to help get us well. Instead, they got us addicted. So fast forward several decades and our current administration is allowing them across our borders at a rapid pace. Doctors won't prescribe them, fine, they'll just get them on the street. And no one in my life has seen this firsthand but my beautiful friend Jen Trejo, who lost her beautiful son, Christopher, to this epidemic. You might recognize her if you've seen the first episode of Netflix's new show, Painkiller. Jen, thank you so much for being with me today. I know that this is a topic that's, especially right now, really hard to talk about coming up on the anniversary, but I want to introduce our friendship just real quick. I think we met 5-6 years ago, something like that, on a cruise ship, and we've just been friends ever since. Right. So, Jen, you're an incredible woman. I already know that. You have a heart of gold, but I want you to tell everyone listening a little bit about you so they can kind of see where they relate to you in different aspects.
Oh, wow. Okay, so I'm just a mom. I'm just a mom of 3. I'm a grandma to 3. They call me Gaia. So I'm a Gaia to 3.
Gaia?
Gaia.
Gaia. Okay.
You know, that means Mother Earth. Like, who would have thought? I know.
Did they come up with that themselves?
Evan did. I know. I was like, cool, I'll take it. But I didn't know what it meant till years later. Crazy.
Very cool. I love it.
Yeah. And so, I mean, that's it. That's what I am.
Is a mom and a Gaia, but you're also like a really good friend and you're a hard worker and you love people really well. You always have. And you have a fiance who I like a lot.
Yeah, he's pretty great.
Yeah,
he's pretty great. Sometimes God puts things in your path for reasons that you don't know yet.
Mm-hmm. How long ago did y'all meet?
So we've been together 6 years.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah, we've been together 6 years, and it's really weird too because I always say that, you know, had I been in my former life, I don't think I would be here. I didn't have the support that I have now, or the understanding, or any of that. So I think God knew that and inserted Jim into my life.
Yeah, so Jim was a big part of that.
Yeah.
But when I met him for the first time, he was so supportive and kind to all of us, and I really like him. I like him a lot.
Yeah.
So
I'm going to keep him. He's all right.
I want to dive into it a little bit. We're just going to kind of get into it. Jen lost her son, Christopher, to addiction, and we're about to come up on the anniversary. So Jen, how long has it been?
How long has it been? 1,000. I always write it down because, you know, it's like, it's really weird. People ask, you know, like, how long has it been? And you're like, you can tell them like a time period, like it's been almost 4 years. So today it's 1,394 days. But I didn't know till the next day. It's like, people always say, you know, like, how long has it been for you? And I mean, there's moms who, you know, have been doing this for 15, 20 years, 20 plus years. And I'm like, these are the days he's been missing from me. Do you know what I mean? That's kind of how I look at it. Um, yeah.
But knowing your story, and I was kind of there for some
Some
of
of
it,
it.
walked some
Yeah.
of that with you. It's actually been a little longer um, than those 1,300 days, and I'll come back to that. But how did this all start?
Uh, with a baseball injury when he was a freshman in high school.
So around 15?
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. And so I guess, yeah, so a baseball injury. And then, he had injuries following that. His knees were really bad. His back was really bad. He was 6'3". He was a pitcher. He was a catcher. He was a fighter,
Mhm.
you know. He always was the one protecting everybody, and would never let anybody talk bad about somebody smaller. So he always stuck up for them, and that got him in a lot of trouble sometimes. But so he's had a lot of surgeries and a lot of prescriptions, and um,
So what happened after the injury? Is that what led to surgery?
yeah, he had Tommy John surgery, or a type of Tommy John surgery. So he apparently threw the ball so hard um, that he ripped the muscle and the tendon off the bone. And
Oh,
so they had to go in and like screw it all back on. And so that was his first surgery. And
and
that was
they provided, I guess, opioids as pain medication.
Oxycontin. Yeah. It's really weird too because I'm looking through file cabinets because obviously, well, I went through a lot of things. And when I moved, I found an original Oxycontin prescription that I had never filled that was in my file cabinet, which was pretty crazy.
Wow.
But so yeah, I mean it just kind of went from there, and like um
But did he stay on the Oxycontin? How long did they have him on it? Was there how many milligrams in a prescription? And then
I really don't know. Like it's been so long, and like it wasn't really something that it literally wasn't something that I thought about or that I understood was the reason and the root cause for his addiction. Like I realized, things were disappearing around my house. I realized that his friends were changing. I realized that his hygiene was changing. I realized that, certain things that he would do would be changing. I realized the way that we interacted was changing. I mean, him and I were like this, throughout his baseball. I mean, I lived
the base
for
mom
him and
on.
his baseball. Yeah. And, Anthony and Angie, were older. Christopher's 5 years younger, and so um yeah, you just didn't see it. You know what I mean? Like I didn't see it, and I didn't know, and we didn't live around people where it was a thing. And if anybody did have any kind of addiction, nobody talked about it. Nobody shared their stories. That's where the stigma comes in, and where we have to like break through that, because had somebody talked about it, or had anybody anything about it, maybe I would have gone, oh crap. Um, this is what's happening. That's what's happening. I just thought he was turning into like this jerk. And
What
and
specific behavioral changes did you see?
um
Especially
behavioral.
between the two of you because you were so close.
He well, um I feel like our relationship started changing when his friends started changing. And I was very fierce in that.
Mhm.
Um, you know, I grew up, you're known by the company you keep. I grew up knowing that if he's hanging around these kids, he doesn't have anything in common with these kids. Like, what is he doing around these kids? He doesn't belong here. He wasn't raised like that.
Mhm.
And that's, I guess, like a really big point, is that this can happen to anyone. Anyone. I don't care what color you are, what race I don't care. how much money you have. It can happen to anybody, and it can happen so slow that you don't even see it. Like I
Right.
didn't even see it for years. I didn't see it.
Tell
And it
me.
wasn't until he was, college that that I was watching and I was like, what is happening?
So
Like
when his
really.
friend group started to change, tell me the difference between his old friends and his newer friends.
Baseball friends, sports friends, and not sports friends.
Did they just have, because you never want to judge a book by its cover, but
Well, they were
was it,
party kids, right? The party kids. Which I mean, I don't know about you, but like I mean, I grew up in the 70s and the 80s, and there were specific groups of kids, and I mean, I was never completely, you know, spotless in that. Um, but it worried me. And so, he wouldn't come home, and I would chase around after him, and I would be pounding on doors, and I'd be like, where's Christopher? Get out here. And I would be like, you don't belong here. Or
hmm,
it's really it's really hard when you look back and you see it,
you
because
can
I
see
didn't
it
see
clear
it.
now. Yeah.
I didn't see it. And now I can see all of it. It's just crystal clear, the whole path. I can see it all. And I mean, yeah, I grew up, I learned tough love, and I learned don't enable, and I learned all the wrong things.
I feel like the view we've been given for decades is when you see someone homeless on the street, like, well, they're drug addicts, don't help them. They want to be there. And now that you
The choice.
right, like they have a
Yeah.
choice to be there. Um, how many times did Christopher go through rehab? Did he go to any rehab?
Never, not one time.
And is it just because you didn't know and didn't know to send him? What was that process?
Well, so I mean, we're back in 2000, 5, 6, 7, maybe 2008, 9, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I mean, at the time, rehabs were like $30,000 and $40,000 a month,
Yeah.
right? But in order for somebody to go to rehab, they have to want to go to rehab.
Mm-hmm.
They have to want to go to rehab. They have to, you know, want it. You can't force somebody to go to rehab. I mean, they're like, he's of sound mind. I'm all, no, I should have been able to somewhere, I always said, but it doesn't work that way.
It's sad that those kind of facilities are so expensive where people can't get well.
They're
People
not so much anymore, but
not so much.
there's still not enough. But I remember a few times talking to him, and he would be like, yeah, I'm waiting for a bed somewhere. I've called. And any person who is doing drugs or is addicted to drugs or substance use disorder, or however you want to say it now, um, anytime anybody says, I want help, you should be able to get help right now.
Mm-hmm.
That should be a phone call, and there should be a bed available for you right now, because that could change in 5 minutes,
Right.
you know? And a lot of people literally die because um, they're like, oh, we'll find you a bed tomorrow. We have a bed for you tomorrow. And then somebody goes out and they get their last high and they die that night.
Yeah.
So,
So after he had surgery, he was about 15 when he had that surgery.
mm,
Obviously, he wasn't prescribed any kind of Oxycontin for years and years and years.
mhm.
So is he one of those people that just got it off the street?
Oh, yeah,
Anyone possible?
definitely.
So when things went missing from your house, did you recognize then that he was selling those? There was no,
No, No. It's weird too because I've gone back and I've looked through photographs. I can remember things missing, but I'll go back and I'll look at photographs and I'll be staring at him, throughout the years and be like, do you see somebody who's got a problem? And I didn't see it. You didn't see it. He didn't. I don't know. Maybe you just don't want to see it. I don't know.
So, in hindsight, for someone who's listening, if they have an inkling that someone, their child or a family member or friend, is involved with street drugs or maybe a prescription, what can they look for? What are some signs that
I
now
mean,
in
just
hindsight you remember?
just like what I just said, are their habits changing? Are their friends changing? Are, things disappearing around your house? Um, Hygiene is a big, I don't know. It's just so many things can change. And then sometimes I've heard stories where parents didn't even, notice any of that.
Hmm. But you were close enough to Christopher to notice those things, but maybe you could have been the parent that was like, well, they're just being 17.
Oh, I was in total denial. I blamed everyone else. I was an absolute crazy person. And I talk to his friends now and they're like, no, you just cared. Like you loved him. Like, and back then they thought I was just an absolute lunatic because I was just out there like, looking for my child. What is he doing? Why are you here? You don't belong here. This is, I, yeah. And they're all doing great with families and it's hard to watch.
When you look back, did Christopher ever say that there was some deeper reason for him using besides
He,
that he got addicted after the surgery?
he didn't. He didn't. Um, no, he didn't. I believe that some people, I mean, first of all, I believe addiction is a disease.
Mm,
Um, and it's just kind of like some people can smoke a cigarette and get lung cancer, and some people can smoke their entire life and never get sick, you
mhm,
know?
mhm.
Um, so some people, I can't personally take opioids. They make me super sick. And and it truly was Dope Sick. I don't know if you watched Dope Sick on
No,
Hulu.
no.
It was watching Dope Sick and watching the character Dr. Finnick, who Michael Keaton played in the show. And he became addicted to the opioids. And I watched him one night on the show. It's a scene in the show, and it was he had taken the pills, he had taken the oxy,
Mhm.
and was like seriously having like hallucinations and was dancing with his wife who had passed away, and he was just euphoric, right? And I remember getting up and throwing the remote of the television and being like, that's what Christopher felt. And
Wow.
I never understood it because I don't feel that way.
Right.
Some
Wow.
people feel that when they take them, and some people don't.
I
So,
never, and I guess that's absolutely true because everyone's body reacts differently to different things.
yeah,
So he just had this amazing euphoric high
yeah.
and didn't want to come down from that ever.
I mean, yeah. And I don't think that he could. I think it was very painful. I think that his body was in a lot of pain. Um, and and then when the pills got too expensive, obviously OxyContin is heroin in a pill, so that was just the next obvious step.
Right. Did he work during this time?
He
Have
did.
jobs on and off? Okay. So was he functioning well at work?
I I don't know. I don't know. At that time, he was not living with us anymore. And I would see him now and then. And this is a very long road.
Yeah.
It was just a very long road um, until he just wasn't functioning anymore.
I know I was around for part of this. So tell me about the last year or 6 months before Christopher passed.
So you would have to go back. So um, May 2018.
Okay.
Okay, so May 2018, Christopher was just at the height of his addiction and was very, very, very sick. He had been limping on his foot for about a year. He had been living on the street for probably, I'm going to say, a full 5 years.
Wow.
Maybe not quite. Like, I brought him home for a while. I'm just really not sure of the time frame when I brought him home. We brought him home for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And and then obviously he had to leave again, but so he was at the it was the worst that he was. This is when I was looking through homeless encampments and going through tunnels and knocking on
Right. I remember.
crack house doors and so his girlfriend had called that night and she had said, Christopher's going to die. If you don't come get him, he's just going to die. And I mean, got up, called the police, went to the house where I knew that he was, which I, I can't even explain to you what that place looked like. It was horrific.
Was it a house or a warehouse? Because I remember you
It was a house. It was
telling
her
me.
house. Yeah. That was just, I mean, it was just, anyways. So we get there, the police, um, Christopher's in the house yelling. He doesn't want to come out. The ambulance is down the street. Um, the police have to clear a scene before medical care can come in. And the police wouldn't clear the scene. He doesn't want to go with you. He's being, violent in there. And I'm like, but he's got a warrant. And they're like, oh, okay. So they run his warrant and they're like, oh, it's not big enough. And I'm like, and I lost my mind. I mean, you know me. I lost my mind. And I was like, you will freaking clear the scene. And so the paramedics finally went in, they took him, and he agreed to get in the ambulance. And that was May 18th. And his legs were probably this big, like literally his lower legs were like this big, and they were just covered in like red splotches. And he'd been limping for a long time. So, like, part of his toe was just like open, but not.
It hadn't been attended to.
We'd been to the hospital. I can't count the number of times. Nobody cares. The stigma is so bad in our medical system when it comes to addiction and when it comes to wound care and when it comes to any of that. Nobody cares. So this particular night that we finally got him to the hospital, my girlfriend was working, and she's an ER nurse. And, because we were all there, because I had a friend there, Christopher got the care.
Mm-hmm.
And so they put him up in CICU. His heart rate is like barely beating. His heart's barely beating. So come to find out the next morning when I finally freaked out over the echo being read, when's the echo going to be read? When? It's like not, I feel like had it been me or you, it would have been like,
right,
taken
it
care
would
of
have been
like right away.
priority.
But because it was him, yeah. So when they finally got the echo, his mitral valve had blown a very long time ago. He had the worst case of endocarditis that the cardiologist had ever seen. And he walked into the room and he looked at me and said, "He's not going to make it. We're very sorry. There's nothing we can do." And then it was like an angel came, and her name was Dr. Connor. And just this, like, I call her hippie looking woman. Yeah. And she had an accent, and she had just signed privileges. She was a cardiothoracic surgeon, and the head of cardio wouldn't do the surgery. And she walked in, she goes, "I'll do it."
Hmm.
And we were like, and I almost didn't want to sign the paper. I'm not going to lie. And I looked at my daughter and I said, "I just want to let him go. It's enough. I mean, look at him." And she said, "Mom, if you don't, you'll never forgive yourself." So we did the surgery. We looked at each other for I think 6 or 7, almost 8 hours, like waiting for them to come tell us that he didn't make it. And he did. He made it through the surgery. So they replaced his mitral valve, but every other valve was leaking. He just wasn't strong enough to fix them. And he was on life support for 7.5 days. And it was the day that I asked the nurse, I was like, "What now?" You know? She said, "We're going to try to wean him today and see what happens." And he weaned right off of it. So, yeah. So that was the beginning of, you see, May, June, July, August, September, a 5-month hospital stay. As the blood pressure or as the blood flow came back, we realized he'd been limping because all of his toes and the ball of his foot were completely dead. They just turned black within the next week. And we were like, "What in the world?" And they were like, "Yeah, the blood flows back. So it's dead. He's been walking around like that," which was why he was limping. I can't even imagine the pain he was in.
Did that Was that the start of a turnaround? Did they figure out, did his movement ever come back with his foot or anything after the 5-month stay?
Oh no, they had to amputate his foot.
Jen, I did not know that.
Yeah, so they amputated half of his foot, and then they amputated one toe on the other foot. Um, and the surgeon did a really great job. I believe that. So that's when our search for a physical rehab started. That's when my fight started with the healthcare system. When I realized that nobody really cares. Um, uh, I remember screaming at the case manager, and I'm driving around to they're going to put him in a convalescent home. They're not going to put him in a physical rehab, and it's not going to be a good one because nobody that's good wants him with his history. So where they put him, I wouldn't have put my worst enemy in this place. And at the time, I couldn't bring him home with me. I just
What was your heart feeling during that time? I'm sure
uh,
it was torn.
broken. I was broken. Part of me wanted to bring him home, and the other part of me was afraid to bring him home. There were parts of Christopher that came out in the couple of years before that were very frightening. And I lived by myself at that time. And I lived in a nice house, but it was older. So like the door to get into the bathroom was small. So his wheelchair would have never fit. And so I think that was kind of, I don't know. So we put him in this place and he's supposed to get physical, you know, he's still on antibiotics. He's still on all the IVs. He's still on all the medication. I mean, he's still on fentanyl. He's still on methadone. He's still on Vicodin. He's still on Norco. He's still on everything. I mean, but he just had his foot amputated. So for me, I was like, he's in pain. Just, I don't even care about the drugs right now, you know? Um, so when he was leaving the hospital, this nurse put a bandage on his foot. And this was the life-changing bandage. She put a bandage on his foot that was completely waterproof. And I told her, no, that doesn't go there. And she was like, it's fine. And I'm like, no, it doesn't go there. That's not the bandage that goes there. And she goes, it's fine. And I'm like, I should have ripped that bandage off. I should have, because I knew better. I don't know why I knew better, but I just knew better. So when he gets to the place, they left it on for 48 hours, that bandage. And when they took it off, the skin on his amputation had completely gone white, like what your sealed bandage.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right?
Like
So
white.
between all of the staples, all of the skin had just, I can't explain. I'd have to show you a picture. So it just continued to get more infected and more infected and more infected and more infected till they had to go in and take more. And then he had to be in a wound vac. And so when his foot finally healed, and it was time to talk drug rehab, he disappeared in the middle of the night.
And when was that?
Mid-September.
September. Because I remember you saying he'd been gone when we started talking again. He had been gone for weeks.
So we reported him as a missing person, and no, like I said, nobody cares. And so it took me going out on the street and talking to people, and talking to people that knew him, and
So
through
you were
that.
the search party. You did what the police should have done, and you searched.
Oh yeah.
And they wouldn't search because he was just another, quote unquote, another addict. We have more important things to do. What was that scary time that you experienced with Christopher?
So going back. Well, I mean, Christopher was very heavy into, I think it was heroin and meth at this time. Like I said, it's much cheaper to get the heroin and the meth than it is to do the 30 or 40 or 50 pills that they do in a day. And a lot of people do that. So one day I had walked out and I heard something in the house, and I walked out and Christopher was literally in the kitchen. He was in my kitchen. And I'm like, and I sit down and I just kind of sit at my dining room table and I'm staring at him, and he's just like walking through the kitchen, like talking to himself, like he lived there. He went in, he got a bowl of cereal, he was petting the dogs, and like he ate his cereal, like he lived there. And I was like, and then he went out and he worked on his bicycle, and then he was like, I'm going to get some of my things out of the garage. I don't know if I want to tell this story on air.
Okay, you don't have to. No, you don't have to. So let's go back to when you did the police job and you did find him. He had been gone for how long had you been gone at this point, or missing? Several weeks?
There were several times where he was gone for weeks at a time. I think that time it was almost a month. that I didn't know where he was. I mean, they'll move like a few miles from where they were at before. And that's an entire world of difference in that community. You know what I mean? Like Christopher was on, this block over here, and then something happened over here, and he would move like a half a mile down the road, and it would be a completely different set of circumstances down there. So there was a few times where that happened. The last time I couldn't find him and couldn't find him and couldn't find him. And I looked for him. Let me see. I looked for him. I remember looking for him on Halloween. And I couldn't find him. And then I'd heard a story. Somebody had told me, yeah, he got taken to Victorville. Somebody took him to Victorville and they left him there.
What is Victorville?
Which is about, so we lived in San Bernardino. So it was up the cone pass towards Vegas. So it was like a half hour. And I was like, how do you know this? Whatever. And I'm like, I don't even care. So I got in the car and I drove up to Victorville. And I spent all day, 6 hours looking for him. I went to every shelter. I went to every rehab place. I went to every homeless encampment. I went to everywhere. I put notes on boards. Like I gave my phone number to people you should probably never give your phone number to. And I was just completely defeated. I couldn't find him and nobody'd seen him. And I was on my way home and I was just, he'd been gone. I don't know where he is. Now he's in a different place. He's alone from what I understand. And so I got off at Bear Valley Road one more time on my way down the hill. And I had a picture that I would show of him. And I remember right between the Chili's and the Sonic parking lot, right off Bear Valley Road. I was leaning down asking this older gentleman, have you seen this kid? And I hear, Mom. And I just fell to the floor, just like, and his shoulders just went down and he was so sad. And I was like, you promised me you would never and
As a mom, I can't even imagine how you felt in that moment.
we talked for a second and he asked me if I would take him into the Walmart and buy him some things. And I told him no. I said, Christopher, I'm not going to make your life out here easier. You don't belong out here. And I will take you to a rehab. I will take you anywhere that you want to go that's going to help you get better, but I'm not going to help you be better out here. And I don't know why, some strange reason I asked if I could take his picture that day. Never done that before. And I took a picture with him, and then I took a picture of him as he walked away. And that was the last time I ever saw him. I looked for him a few more times after that, but I couldn't find him. And little did I know, he was just like 2 blocks further down a road that I was driving. But
well, I'm sure that in your last moment together, especially knowing that his shoulders went down. he knew that you loved him so much.
I heard, I mean, obviously, I went and found every single person after he died to learn, anything that I could. And I learned that 2 weeks before he died, he had gone to the hospital. He was sick. He was sick again. And he sat there for 7 hours and nobody even came out to help him. So he left. I know that he was very sick the night that he died. And I also know that the lady who took him to the hospital, I met her, and she told me stories of, she said, it's really strange. She said, addicts usually just talk nothing but shit about their family, how they're just, nobody cares and nobody, their parents are worthless and whatever. And she said, and Christopher just did nothing but talk good about you and how much. But that he just didn't want to put me through anything else. So,
So even when maybe he wasn't in his right mind, his heart still knew that you loved him a lot. He knew. I remember you telling me when you were looking for him, that you had already kind of mourned losing him, and
well,
then
yeah,
you
you
found him.
watch them. Yeah. I mean, when you're a mother or a parent of an addict, and I mean, you see the videos, you see what's going on the streets, and you watch your beautiful, athletic child who just was, his life force was like none other, um, turn into somebody that you don't recognize. And yeah, I mourned him for about 10 years, before. And so, yeah, I mean, my heart just breaks for all the moms who are still out, still out there looking. And um, yeah, that's a special kind of help.
Where were you when you got the call? I remember where I was when you ended up texting me about Christopher, but you said you didn't find out until the day after.
I was here in the house. Um,
Were you alone? Were you with Jem?
no, I always had my phone on me just in case he called, always. And for some reason on that day, I did not have my phone. And so my son was the one who got the call. It was almost 5 o'clock on the 21st. And I was sitting there, Jim and I were sitting there, and his dad was here. One of my friends were here. And um, I had just started doing research. Okay, I have to be able to do something. Something has to be done. I have to be able to find a bed for him. I have to be able to find somewhere. This is just ridiculous. And I was just starting to get educated. I was just starting to like reach out and be like, there has to be something more than this. Like, I can't just sit here and wait for him. Obviously, rock bottom. If his surgery wasn't rock bottom, there is no rock bottom without death. Right. And so, and still kind of being in that mindset, because that's all I ever knew. I expected Christopher to stand up and talk to me on my level. And what I didn't know was that I needed to sit down on the ground and talk to him on his level. And that's a very important point. You have to meet them where they're at. And I didn't know that. And so on that day, my son called. and I heard his voice, and I heard him say, "Go outside." And and Jim went outside, and I was like, they must be talking about Christmas or whatever. Didn't even. And Jim came in the house and opened the sliding glass door, and I just looked at him, and I knew, and I knew, and I don't really remember anything after that. Jim kind of told me my reactions, but I really don't. I don't remember. Um, I remember calling the coroner. I remember being like, "I want to see my son," and she goes, "You can't see him. We've already identified him. Uh, um, you'll be able to. You need to call a mortuary. Once the autopsy's done, then the mortuary would pick him up, and then you can see him." And I'm like, "When is that going to happen?" She goes, "I don't know. We're very backlogged. It could take up to a year." And I'm like, "You're telling me that I might not be able to see my child?" And she said, "Yes." So, so that was the 21st. And I think I saw him. God, my dates are all my life is a blur of dates. Um, it was like 3 weeks, and I finally got to see him.
Yeah,
And
yes.
the lady at the mortuary was like, "I will tell you whether or not you should see him." And I said, "No, there is no question. I will see him." And so when he finally got there, Jim and Anthony went with me, and she opened the door, and I went in and closed it behind me. And I don't really remember that either. I think our brain protects us from the most painful moments.
Mm.
Um, yeah. Um, all I know is the article in the newspaper, the comments in the article were horrific about how they treated his body, about how they just threw him in a van, about how they just scooted him across the pavement. People were traumatized for the rest of their lives about what they witnessed on how they treated his body. I know that at 1:30 in the morning, he went to the place where he passed away. I never say passed away. It's so weird. Um, he had gotten kicked out of the it was a CVS or a Rite Aid or something across the parking lot, and they kicked him out of there. And he just got up and put the blanket over his head and walked away and walked over to the gas station. And I think he curled up in between those two things to stay warm. Um, and so that was at like 1:30. Um, there was no movement after 3 o'clock on their camera. Somebody went out at 4:30 to take out the trash. Nobody even thought of walking out the door, just right out the door. So somebody went out at 4:30 to take out the garbage and kind of kicked his foot and nothing. And so they called for help at 4:30. Nobody came for 2 hours. Unresponsive mail, no one came for 2 hours. And and then they didn't take his body away till like 9:30.
In the morning. Did you talk to anybody at the store and ask them why, or the police department, why did you leave him there for 2 hours?
You
Were you
know, I
any
have
answers?
I um I had my words with the coroner.
Right.
Um I never did call the police. I was afraid of what I would say to the police officer. And and I didn't think that that was another face that I needed in my memory.
When we talked earlier this week, you said that your heart was now on the street,
Oh,
like
yeah.
mission.
So I told you that I had never helped Christopher when he was out there. Like, I would bring him blankets. I'm not going to say never. I mean, Anthony and I took turns. We tried to make sure we fed him every day. We tried to make sure that we found him every day, um, and that he at least ate once a day. Um, I would bring him blankets. On holidays. We would give him necessities. You know what I mean? Um, for his for his for his last birthday. On his last birthday, I didn't see him, but the birthday before that, I went and got him some clothes and some shoes, and told him to take a shower, and I took him to his favorite restaurant, random, and he thanked me after that for making him feel normal for a day.
Mm, mm.
I wish I would have brought him home. I don't know that it would have changed the outcome. I don't know if I'll ever get over the guilt that I feel. No, I'll never get over it. Um, I would give everything to know then what I know now. But yeah, so I think that it was snowing. There was still snow on the ground um, in the place where he died. Um, he didn't have a tent or a sleeping bag or anything. There was a blanket that he had that I have now that wouldn't even have barely covered him, and that's all he had. Um, and so when I went up to see where he died, I had already packed up some blankets and hand warmers and gloves and hats and all the things to like give to people, whoever I saw. And that's kind of where it started. And then I think it was right before Christmas, I made that video, my first video after he died. And was like, I realize it's Christmas, but it doesn't take away from the fact that it's freezing and Christopher would want me to help people. Um, I heard stories about, I mean, Christopher would have nothing, be starving, and other people would be hungry, and he would go out and get them food, or he would help them however he could. And so he was still protecting people who couldn't help themselves,
Mm.
even when he had nothing.
You were telling me about the homeless community and how you'll go ask them. You said get on their level. You have to talk to them from their
Yeah,
perspective, there and posture yourself differently.
yeah.
And you said how tight knit this community becomes, and that you gave me an example of somebody that you asked, "What do you need?" And they didn't ask you for more than what they needed. Tell me about that.
They never do. It's the craziest thing. It's like you you always have to approach um carefully. Um I started out, when I was looking for Christopher, I would walk up on a campus and I'd be like, I mean you no harm. You know what I mean? Because you don't know.
Right.
Uh, I'm just looking for my son, Christopher, tall, blonde, whatever. And people tell me, yeah, I saw him. So it was a long time that I was out there. And so these people knew me. Um, and a lot of them call me mom. And a lot of them, a few of them have died. And, um, but yeah, so it's the craziest thing. The people with the least amount take the least amount.
Hmm.
They only take what they need. But if they know somebody who needs something else, they will ask permission to take an extra something, whatever it is that they know somebody else needs.
What would you say to the stigma of people, and I have been this person before, I'm not going to give them money because they are just going to go use it on drugs or alcohol or feed their addiction. What do you say to that? Is that true?
Um, so for me personally, when I give, no matter what I give, I have to give it without judgment. It's not my job to judge. And and that's very hard because we've been taught as a society to judge these
Yeah.
people.
Right.
And I don't mean to say these people, but you know what I mean. Um, Once you give it in a loving spirit, or you give it, you know what I mean? And
With no
then
expectations.
with no, you can't have any expectations of what they're going to do with it. So, um, I learned with Chris, you don't give money. And so my trunk is always full of sleeping bags and tents and full backpacks and Narcan and fentanyl test strips and water and food. Um, um, and then once a year, I do, since, his on his first birthday, that's how I decided I would honor him. Um, so the first year we did 33, and this year we'll do 36. And it's a lot. It's a tent, and it's a sleeping bag, and it's a blanket, and it's a really nice backpack, and it's full of food, and um I have a whole list of, there's so much that goes into it, like so much that goes into it. I mean, it's first aid, kits, it's
Wonderful.
food, it's gloves, it's hats, it's hand warmers, it's water, it's sometimes mylar blankets, it's sometimes another blanket. Right now I'm putting sweatshirts, hoodie sweatshirts in there. Um, it's a lot. It takes a lot, and it takes a village to do this. And then I do it again on Christmas Eve. And we always like wrap some sort of a little present. Like last year we gave away like really bright flashlights, but you wrap them,
Right.
or a box of chocolates and you wrap them, because and I think it was last year that I started doing the stockings, because imagine what that would mean to someone. I
Right.
can't even, and it's stupid, and people are like, you know, and I'm like, they're human beings and it's Christmas. And what would Jesus do?
What would Jesus do?
These
Absolutely.
are the people that you're supposed to help. I mean, read the book. So,
Well,
yeah.
I love that you do this, and I actually was talking to some of my girlfriends on a live earlier today, and we want to participate in Christopher's birthday this year and do
Well,
that with you. We would love to do that with you. And I have another question.
yeah.
What do you think the homeless community, the people on the streets, could teach the world?
I think that all depends on what your city you're in. I think it all depends on where you're at. Like in San Bernardino, the homeless population is very large, but it's also very spread out.
Mm.
Um, and so you have more of a chance to sit down and actually have a one-on-one conversation. Um, I had one guy ask me one day, he was in his young 20s, and I was like, "What can I do for you?" And he was like, "Can you sit and talk to me?" Sure. Sat down and had a conversation. And I always have like Jim and Anthony like in cars behind me, because they're like, "I'm not letting you go out by yourself," but I don't have any fear. I told you that. Christopher and Jesus, they've got my back in this, and I know that nobody's going to hurt me. I know it.
And the Holy
Um,
Spirit actually kept you from going to a place one night, you told me.
100% stopped me dead in my tracks. Like I literally couldn't have taken another step forward if I wanted to. And I heard it. You don't go here. loud and clear, just loud, like everybody could have heard it. You don't go here. And these kids were standing at the other end of it, these young kids who I was going to see. I knew they were there. And I just,
Hmm.
I'm like, no. And I turned around and got in my car, just cried and cried. Yeah. But I always feel safe. Um, we've helped a blind person who was out there on the street and made sure that, all of his, and it was getting ready to pour rain. And I always go out right before, the weather and make sure. And then I always go out like right after it rains. And that's just devastating because everything's wet. Um, which is when I started adding tarps into my,
Hmm.
um, so yeah, it depends. It depends on where you're at. Um, when you're in a row of homeless that goes on for miles, because it does. I don't know what it is like where you are, but here in California, it's just,
It's like a city, its own city.
oh, it's the entire city. It's literally, except for a few blocks, it's just motorhome after motorhome after motorhome or tent after tent. It's just, it's never ending. I can't go in those places. Um, First of all, I can't go because it breaks my heart when I can't help everyone.
Mm.
Um, yeah, that's devastating when there's people that you just didn't have enough. And I always like to go, I always start in San Bernardino with the people who know Chris. And it started out almost very selfishly because they didn't know what I had to give them. And I would just walk up and ask them, did you know my son? And they would either say yes or no. And if they said yes, I would be like, can you tell me something? And they would tell me a story or whatever. And I would just give them, I'll be right back. And I would give them, everything. And they would be there, they would cry. I mean, literally, like who does that?
Do you remember any of the stories maybe one of the people told that knew him that made
Um,
you laugh or
I mean, they all pretty much said he was a youngster, he was a kid. He wasn't, but he was. Um, uh, Christopher took care of people, but Christopher also was homeless and had to take care of himself, and whatever that means.
so that was kind of the general consensus of people you talked to is he just cared about people.
He cared about people. Yeah, he did. He always did. You know, drugs take away. They couldn't take away the basic good in him.
Hmm.
And I had been worried about Christopher's faith towards the end. Um, and it really bothered me a lot. And I really started praying on it a lot because I was scared.
Hmm.
And I started talking to him. Hey, you know, when you're feeling this way, when you're feeling a certain way, I need for you to sit down and pray. And at first he was like, there is no God. Look around you. Like, look around you. God would never allow this. And I'm like, Christopher, yes, he would. And you know that. And I said, but you need to remember your faith now. And you need to start praying. And it was about a week later, I think, he got in my car and he was all excited. We'd found him and I was taking him for Chinese food or something. And he said, and this was for me now. I know these conversations were for me now. He said, Mom, I was hungry last night. I was so hungry. And I prayed and I prayed and I prayed that Jesus would, whatever. And somebody brought me food. Mom. I was, and I would see him like the next time, whatever, Mom, I was cold or whatever, and I prayed, and somebody gave me a blanket, and I was like, and
That's why
he,
people don't, miracles come in all different size of packages. And
yeah,
I'm so glad that he realized that that was an answer to prayer. That was God showing him you're not alone.
oh no, 100%. And so, um, on the back of Christopher's bracelets, I showed you, it's Romans 8:38-39. And Christopher accepted Jesus when he was 12 and baptized in school programs and leads in the plays, and um, stood up in a college history class and challenged the teacher on evolution. He was that. I know, I know without a shadow of a doubt where my son is. And that is the only thing that gets me through life. Because I know that he's healthy. He no longer has a big scar on his chest. He's got his foot back. Um, and he's dancing with angels.
And he would not trade that to come
Oh,
back.
and the thing is people used to be like, some moms, I would give anything to have them back. Not the way he was. You know what I mean? He's in heaven. And someday I'm gonna hug him. And that's all I know. Yeah.
That's enough, because we know that when we lose someone, especially that way, he knew Jesus.
He did.
That's our
He did.
peace.
And it was really important to me because I went to talk to my pastor, and it was really funny because my pastor baptized Christopher, and he also did his service. He's been my pastor since 1996. It's like a father to me. He's like one of my favorite humans. Um, and I go in and we're talking about his service, and I was like, I don't know what it is, but you know that passage where it says, I will never forsake you, I will never leave you, once you've been saved, I will never depart from you. And I'm like, that one, what's that one? And he told me, and I was like, that one. That's the one. And that's where I lay everything on.
I've heard this quote that you can't help everyone, but do for one person what you could do for everyone. And you're doing that, and you're doing that for Christopher. And Christopher had your giving heart too.
Yeah.
So proud of the work that you're doing. Not just Christopher, of course, the Lord is so proud of you for what you're doing. And this has been such a loss, but look what it's turned you into. The hands and feet of Jesus that won't go to those places. And I admire that so much, because it can be scary, and not everyone is called or feels led to do those things, but you absolutely have. And you've changed lives. You told me someone even went home. And
Yeah.
you answered. You were the answer to someone's prayer. I had no idea the impact of Oxycontin or anything until the last few years, when I woke up to all the things. And
It's
the
crazy, isn't it? How we didn't know.
no,
And
just
the craziest thing is I'll be at the Department of Justice again on the 22nd. But I was there for the bankruptcy last time in 21. And that was my first trip to Washington. And they had the evidence in their hand, the Department of Justice, already before Christopher ever took his first pill. I mean, if that doesn't spark rage
Yeah.
into the souls of every single human on the planet, because this is the number one killer. Every 5 minutes, a mother is getting a phone call. Every 5 minutes. It's like the equivalent of a jumbo jet crashing every single solitary day in the United States of opioid related death. And we do nothing. Our borders are wide open. Fentanyl is just, I mean, fentanyl's taken over where the Sacklers left off.
Right. Right.
And the
So
Sacklers are still just free.
how were you approached to open up? Well, I guess you didn't realize that you were opening up, but when you were notified for the Netflix Painkillers, how did that all happen?
I had a lady reach out to me from Netflix, and she had been given my name. And she asked me if it'd be something I would be interested in doing. And I said, I mean, that's very scary, you know. I didn't know what exactly it was going to be. And I didn't know necessarily if I wanted to put Christopher's name on something that I wasn't sure, excuse me, what exactly it was going to be. And the more I learned about who was producing it and what it was based on, and I was like, yeah, you know, okay. And they came to my house. Um, yeah, very, very nice people came to my house and sat and with me for a while, and then on camera for a while. And then, you know, you're kind of scared as to what they're actually going to pick and choose out of what you said. And oh my gosh, what did I say? You know, um, I think they were extremely respectful of all the parents. He had called me, Eric Newman had called me a few weeks before. So I had a screener's copy of Painkiller, so I had seen it. He also told me it's going to be very shocking because you're the first face. And it was very shocking. It's still very hard to watch it. I think I cry every time. Um,
From my
that show
perspective,
enraged me.
yes.
I mean, it sparked way more rage than Dope Sick did. Dope Sick did an amazing, amazing job. But this was a little bit different.
It paints the picture painfully well.
Oh yeah.
It's I've watched the first 5 episodes, I believe, and it takes you through the Purdue side and the Sackler side. It takes you through every different perspective. The girls selling to the doctors, how much money they make. They're very clear. I don't see any lie in any of it, from behavior to manipulation to anything. The one difference I've seen is you versus the other parents that open up the other episodes. And I said this to you earlier this week. I said, your opening is just so heartfelt. Not that they don't miss their family member or their child or friend, but you live in these streets every single day. And I feel like that's why you were first, is because your heart, you just see it poured out.
Yeah, I haven't met the other parents yet. I'm hoping that they come to Washington. And so I'm really hoping that I meet the other parents. Um, I think that everybody has dealt with it different.
Yeah.
Um, I I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I for the first year, I think I was just kind of like, because Christopher was out there for so long. So for like the first year, there would be times when I would wake up and I would be like, oh my God, I have to look for Christopher today. And then my eyes would open and I would be like, oh, no, I guess I don't.
Mm.
And it wasn't until I think the second, maybe almost third year that it just finally settled. Holy shit. He's really gone. This really happened. I was really that uneducated. I didn't know. I didn't care enough to know. I should have done this. I should have done that. I should have. And then I'm learning that all of these other parents knew. Why didn't I know? Um, like I told you, that's my cross. I
Mm.
carry it every day. Um, and people say I have to give myself a break for it. Um, maybe someday. Um,
But what I admire is even though you feel a lot of guilt, um, as any mom would, I think any mom would, you're using it to make a difference. And you don't even know the lives that you've saved and touched.
there's so many that just feel lost and unloved. And when you hand somebody just the most basic of necessities and they cry and they just can't say thank you enough. um uh, I always just pray that Christopher had somebody like me in his life
I'm sure
because
he,
I wasn't there.
I'm sure he
And
did.
like that, I hope that he did. I
And you know
hope.
what if he didn't for a while until he prayed? And that's what got him back into, because you told him to pray and then he
Yeah,
did. What if that
yeah.
got him back on this spiritual high? Like
I
God
don't
is
know.
real.
I
Could
mean,
have.
I don't know. The last thing I can do is try to get into his head. um I mean, I know he was sick and I'm mad at him that he didn't call me. um yeah. I mean, Christopher's not even counted in the overdose deaths. Christopher didn't
Really?
overdose. Mm-mm. See, that's the thing. You asked me about numbers when we were first starting to talk about this. You were like thousands. We're in the millions. We're in
Wow.
the millions. Christopher's not even counted. Christopher's death certificate says natural causes due to long-term IV drug use.
Wow. And
Mhm.
that's what the autopsy came back with?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I called them and I go, natural causes. Wow. And they're like, well, there's car accident, heart attack, and natural causes due to whatever. Where do you want him? And I'm like,
Were they seriously that heartless about his death? This is, I guess it's just a job
it's a job.
box.
It's a job. And my son says it very well. My son says that random mundane phone call that they have to make every day was the phone call that Anthony got. I will never forgive myself for not picking up my phone. He should have never gotten that phone call.
How is he to this day about everything? Do you
Um, he has his bad days. We both have our really bad days. Um, Christopher lives in the music for us, in the music. And sometimes I'll wake up and I'll be thinking about him or that hummingbird that's sitting out in my front that visits me every morning. And he just flies and his chest is all bright orange and he just flies around my window. And it's the signs, just the signs, the big yellow butterfly, um, or the beautiful clouds or the rainbows or Yeah. Did I tell you there was a rainbow coming out of the coroner's van?
No.
Yeah. I'll
Wow.
send you that picture.
Yeah, send it to me.
Yeah. Homeless man found unresponsive in a gas station parking lot. And it's the tape in the coroner's van, and coming out from behind the coroner's van is just the most beautiful rainbow. And I like to think that Jesus came and set out his hand and said, "It's enough. It's time. You've suffered enough." And he took him. And that's what I think happened.
I know this is it's hard to relive this, talking about it, but you tell it so well now because you're an advocate for this. So you didn't know how many of us were absolutely clueless, but now you've made it a mission to educate people. And I say you be as loud as you want. People can think that we're crazy. It's fine. But
Yeah.
we didn't just get here. We have been in this place for decades.
Decades. Yes.
Decades. And we need to know how everything evolved and why it's still happening today. And the bottom line is the love of money.
Oh, yeah.
It's what the Bible warns us about is the love
Our
of
government is corrupt. The DEA is complicit. The FDA is complicit. The DOJ is complicit. They're all complicit. They're just as guilty as Purdue Pharma. I mean, they might as well just given Christopher the drugs on their own.
I
It's
know.
true.
It's true.
And yeah, it's it's I mean, there's really no word for it, when you look at it and you like look at all of it, and why wasn't this stopped? And I mean, El Chapo's in jail. Why isn't Richard Sackler in jail? He
Right.
killed way more people,
Right.
right? Um, the parents of the kids who have been, the fentanyl, um, they want the dealers put in prison for the rest of their lives. A dealer, what if he's an addict? You know what I mean? So you want that. Why can't I want this? Why are the Sackler family, why do they still have $11 billion? Why are they still free? Why has not one criminal charge ever been filed? Ever. Why
Because
has the Sackler family never been charged with a crime?
because everybody that's complicit in it gets a piece of the pie.
Isn't it ridiculous? It's criminal in itself.
It's organized crime.
Sackler cartel, that's what we call them.
Well, Jen, where can we donate? Where can we get involved? Where's your Amazon wish list? Tell people listening where we can start to help and get
Well,
backpacks for Christopher.
I a couple times a year I put up an Amazon wish list. Other than that, if anybody ever wants to donate, they can just message me and I'll send them my Venmo or my Zelle or whatever. Like right now, Big Five has sleeping bags on sale for $16.99. So when I get off the phone, I'm gonna buy a bunch of those. Um, um, I started the foundation page and I fully intended to make it a nonprofit within the first year. I wanted to do it in 22. Obviously, that was Christopher's baseball number. I have a friend who donated $1,000 to me, and I still have that $1,000 in an account because that will pay for the nonprofit.
Hmm.
My problem is this. So, I have this grandiose idea of buying this big, huge, old building downtown LA and having wound care and having rehab and having shelter and having, all the things in one building. And that's kind of like my dream, is to make a place that's welcoming and inviting and has harm reduction and all the things. But I need a nonprofit status to do that. Or I don't know what I need. I'm not a legal person. All I know is it takes a lot of money to start a nonprofit. And do you know how many sleeping bags I can buy with the money that it takes to start a nonprofit?
Mm.
And so that's why I haven't done it yet.
Mm.
Um,
Mm.
but I'm never going to get the kind of donations that I need in order to do the things that I do until I do that. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. So,
Well, I want us to work together. I want you to have as many backpacks as you possibly need. Like when you run out, I want you to be able to say, I'll be back in an hour and go fill up your car again because everything's ready
yeah.
at home. So I'm going to include in the video and a link to, if you have a link to your Amazon wish list, all the things that we're going to need, because I want to do more than enough, because you
Yeah.
never know what God can do right now. I don't know why I had this on my heart to start this podcast in the first place. What does it need to be? What does it need to be about? It doesn't need to be about waking up and politics. I mean, I'm sure it'll include a lot of life situations and topics, but what's going to make a difference? Because even though this is a tragic story, you're restoring other people's lives on the street, even by just the necessity. And your story could be someone's healing story.
Yeah. I think every parent who's lost a child is, I always say everybody's got a place in it, whether it be on the street, whether it be in recovery. Recovery is very hard for me. I'm not there yet. So I have to work on that. I'm still, I think, kind of angry as to, well, why not? Why not Christopher? You know what I mean? And I know that sounds bad. It sounds horrible.
Sounds
But there's a lot, the people changing laws, and there's people changing the world. There's people putting Narcan in schools. There's people, doing harm reduction sites with clean syringes. There's people doing wound care. There's people doing so many things, so many beautiful things. It's just there's so much that needs to be done. I mean, it just got away from us. And I mean, look around. In every big city. I mean,
every big city.
it, we went to Portland to do the Dancing with the Angels. I don't know if you saw that.
It's
On the
it feels like a different country up there.
Oh my God, and Portland used to be so beautiful, and now it just was devastating. I just cried for 25 minutes driving out of Portland because it just never stopped. It was horrible. Yeah.
I think the work that you're doing is fantastic. I think that you sounding crazy is the best thing you could possibly do, because those of us who sound crazy and say the things that they don't want to hear them, but they're true.
Yeah.
It's time that it's not silenced anymore. It's
Yeah.
not shoved under the rug. It's not paid off. It's time to hear these stories, recognize what is actually happening.
Yeah.
Because if they're not going to do anything about it legally, how can we change it? And the only thing is that I can think of is asking God to use us to fight this battle with love that surpasses all understanding.
I mean, I wish I had like way more information for you. I wish I had so much more. I get very emotionally wrapped up in this, and then I lose my words. But
We can
yeah,
do
it's
on
been a
that.
lot.
You just keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah, my heart lives on the street, and it's hard, and it takes everything out of me. And sometimes I get in the car and I just cry and cry and cry and cry. It just depends. Sometimes I'll just see Christopher in somebody's face, and I'll just It's devastating. These are children out here. They're kids. They're kids. They're starting out as kids. And they're just lost. And they're so lost. And they're alone. And they have no one. And they get looked at like people should be ashamed of how they look at them,
I'm
in my
ashamed
opinion.
how I've looked at them.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's true. It's like sometimes it takes somebody like me or anybody or anyone to kind of flip it to how you view it, because it's a small kind of, do you know what I mean? Like some people are like, oh, you're nasty, you're dirty, go get a job, or go get away from me, or you can get a job, or can they go get a job? Look at them. Can they go get assistance? No, they can't. They don't have an address. You have to have an address to get assistance. Christopher went to a shelter 2 times. 2. The first time somebody stole all of his things, and the second time he woke up to some guy feeling his leg. He would have rather slept on the street. That is not okay. You have to have an ID to go in a shelter. They don't have IDs. You can't have a criminal record to go in a shelter. That's ridiculous. So you can't ever have broken the law ever in order to get warmth. What world do we live in?
One that has things very backwards, Jen.
You're so upside down. What are you going to do? I don't know. One person at a time, I guess.
One person at a time.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing.
Welcome.
I love you.
Love you.